birthday.
Happy birthday, May.
No, the start of the XFL or whatever it's called. It's her present. I brought back football just for you. It's gonna get dangerous. Yeah, I know I shouldn't have, but I did. Oh boy. Yeah, I have Trayvon Boykin's Wikipedia up. That's not gonna get it done. All right. Yes, sir. All right, it is that time. Welcome in, everybody. You may be the NBA crowd, maybe the NHL crowd, even though they are playing tonight. And certainly the college basketball crowd, because this is the national championship game, the last game of the year. It's a good one. It really is. Kansas, North Carolina, and we have everything that you need to hopefully make some money tonight, build some lineups, take some props, talk about it. Who better than Mr. Matt Gajewski, who joins me as he always does in the college basketball season. Sir, we were talking before the show about the USFL, but now we shift back our focus to college hoops. One final game. How do you feel with about 50 minutes to go before our tip-off?
I'm feeling really good, man. I'm really excited. It's been a fantastic tournament full of upsets to begin, and then we had the Blue Bloods Final Four. Two pretty good games overall, both of them fairly competitive. So that was awesome to see. And we have a ton of talent in tonight's game. You know, we have Kansas making it all the way through, and then a little bit of upset for North Carolina, but a very strong team down the stretch. And according to a lot of places, data companies like Bart Torvik, this is the hottest team in the country since the month of March started. So a team that definitely gelled towards the end of the year, had a lot of transfers, new head coach, but they're finally playing like the team we thought they'd be.
No doubt. Obviously, when you're, an 8 seed, you make a run, but truly a team that by a lot of metrics were playing much better than that seed, pulled the upset. And we're going to dive into how these teams got there when we talk about them. To me, they had a much tougher road. Kansas, I don't know really who they've played, to be honest. But before we even do that, a couple things. One, for people who are sticking with us the entire year or hopping in for the first time, welcome aboard. You want to support us? Hit the like button, easiest way to do it. And if you're not subscribed, 75,200 other people are recommending that you do so. Hit that subscribe button. We'd love you to join the community. Of course, Odd Shopper YouTube as well. Different story for a different time. We'll get some gambling takes in here as well. But I want to ask you the big difference, and we broke down all the rounds of the tournament. We were talking about, 16 game slates, 8 game slates, 4 game slates, 2 game slates. We have one game tonight, and that is Showdown now. So general thoughts on Showdown. We do it for other sports, but we are only choosing from one game tonight.
Yeah, Showdown, it's a little different, but I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this from NBA, NHL, NFL. Basically, there's a different sort of game theory that comes with this. You don't want to run into some of the duplication just with the optimal lineups. We know that some of these lineups can be very heavily duplicated. So it comes down to, what do you win when you're right? And when you're playing the same lineup as everybody else, that's not going to pay you off like you deserve if you are actually able to predict the winning lineup. Conversely, if you go a little more contrarian and you're able to take it down solo or just with a couple chops, you're going to be paid off in a lot better fashion. So I think that's the first thing to think about. There's a couple ways we can get into that. One is leaving salary on the table, kind of a strategy we use across sports. But I think just getting contrarian with your captain as well, especially with two teams that play fairly condensed rotations, that can be another avenue.
Do you play cash on something like this, or you stick to mostly large field tournaments?
Oh, I'm playing cash.
Oh, okay. I shouldn't have even asked. Like I said, you told me before your show you wrote like a 20,000 word manifesto on USFL. So if you want to play that, we've got you covered here. Just a little tease for what you'll be doing after the college hoop season ends. I'm ready to get into it. If you are, we're going to talk PrizePicks, of course, as well in a little bit. But you want to start with the Tar Heels?
Yeah, man. Ready to start.
All right. So here we go. North Carolina, just absolutely crushed Marquette. Got through Baylor. Then they played, and I'm doing this from memory here. Then they played UCLA, competitive game. Then they played St. Peter's, lopsided game. Then they had the game against Duke, which we saw just a day or two ago. And now they are here. They've got Baycott on the inside. First question. It seems like the ankle issue is a non-issue. Is that what you're reading into this?
As best I can. I'm not a doctor, but from what I've gathered, Baycott never wore a boot. He never was on crutches. All the things you really worry about somebody dealing with a lower body injury, an ankle injury. He was walking off the bus after that Final Four game. So with the clues that we have, it seems to me like he's pretty close to full health. I don't think he's going to be 100%, but if the medical staff doesn't have any concerns with that to put him in a boot or anything like that, I'm not sure we should have concerns either. So I'm operating as if Bacot is close to full health.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed from what I heard, he practiced, should be good. Of course, they're going to need him. His rebounding prop is still through the roof. And on this game, he is pretty sizably the most expensive player. So this is a team, they're a 4-point underdog, a 74 implied team total. But let's start with Bacot. He's going to be on the floor as much as humanly possible, pending foul trouble, and they're not a deep team. So right off the bat, and it's been a discussion in chat, what do you do with this guy? He's a polarizing popular option. Do you look to him right off the top as your captain, or do you say, you know what, maybe some other strategies?
The first thing I'll highlight with Bacot, FanDuel is significantly tighter in terms of pricing today, which is not something we normally say, but it is the case. On DraftKings, you can pretty easily play Bacot, and you can even captain him. It's not real difficult. You do make some concessions. For example, if you play a cheaper captain like Caleb Love, you can play all the big four in North Carolina and then still get some pretty good Kansas players. If you play Bacot, you're probably limited to just 3 of the big 4 in North Carolina, or maybe you can't play the Kansas stud you'd like. But with that, Bacot has the highest ceiling on the entire slate, and it's not really that close. The guy's averaging a double-double on the year. Even in just the last 3 games, his rates are absolutely absurd. The guy has a 44% rebound rate over the last 3 games, which is just mind-blowing. Usually when players are cresting that 30% mark, that's that elite tier, and Bacot is about 15% north of that. The guy had over 20 rebounds in 32 minutes, a game where he got hurt and a game he fouled out of, against Duke, a team with a ton of size, in Mark Williams and Banchero and some of their other players are very long. It just flat out didn't matter. At this point, Armando Bacot is essentially playing that Oscar Tshiebwe role for North Carolina, and I would be shocked if he doesn't hit a double-double here. This guy has immense upside, and that doesn't even take into account the opponent. Kansas is not the largest team, and North Carolina hasn't played the biggest teams here, but seeing what Bacot did against Duke does give me confidence against a smaller Jayhawk squad in a spot where Bacot certainly is going to have the rebounding advantages.
That was the most, I might even say surprising, but Marquette, Baylor, UCLA, and St. Peter's, it's a pretty good lineup for him. And then he goes against the front court with Williams and Banchero and some of the other bigs. Just no problem. 21 rebounds. He did not do that in the first 2 matchups with Duke. I believe he didn't double-double in either of them, actually. And to see him make just a gigantic leap, it's almost locked and loaded. He's not going to give you much else in the peripherals, but he's still a walking double-double. His prize pick rebounding prop is at 13.5. And I think you could make a pretty easy case for the over pending he stays out of foul trouble. But you've got him clearly going to be a captain option, clearly going to be a popular utility, just a popular guy. But let's talk about the rest of the Tar Heels. The next guy up is Brady Manek, another guy in the front court, can shoot threes, can kind of do it all. He's had some huge games. He got ejected in the Baylor game, but that was going to be a just absolutely ceiling performance. What do you do with him? Can you pair him with Bacot? Does anything go like that? How do you go to the next man up here?
I'm essentially comfortable playing any of the Tar Heels starting 5 with anyone else in that team. They play such a tight rotation. I don't think you're worried about any sort of negative correlation whatsoever with this team. They're just on the floor too much for that to be a big worry. With Manek, he probably brings the second most double-double equity for this team just because of his presence in the front court. But that's kind of selling his skill set a little bit low. This guy has been the best 3-point shooter on the team all year percentage-wise. He hasn't taken quite as many as a player like Caleb Love, but he's not too far behind, and he's shooting them at a 40% clip this season. And we've seen him recently take a bunch of really tough ones. So with Manek, I think you're also dealing with a player not only who doesn't foul as much as Bacot, but he's also not injured. So if you think Bacot is injured for whatever reason, it's going to be Manek, I think, that steps up in the front court. He kind of has to just because of the tight rotation they're already playing. And we'll talk about the ancillary pieces, but I think you're not going to necessarily see just one guy step up for Bacot if he gets in foul trouble or something like that. So Manek right away, just super consistent across the board. He's too cheap. I'll highlight him on FanDuel where he is the cheapest of the big 4 North Carolina Tar Heels, and he's the best play over there. But I think he's viable in captain, and I think he is somebody that you could actually take advantage of, maybe get some positive leverage with in the captain on DraftKings because he kind of sits between the Love tier and the Bacot tier, but he does have a clear advantage from 3. Kansas, they've defended the 3 and the perimeter fairly well this year. They're 17th in the country in terms of 3-point defense, but they do have one weakness that comes against ball screens and bigger guards and some of these stretch forwards. And North Carolina has those players. Even against Nova, we saw them struggle a little bit against ball screens, and we know North Carolina is going to take advantage of that matchup to get their shooters some open looks. Manek is a player with size that certainly takes advantage of a smaller team, especially when he's on the perimeter shooting threes. So I like Manek a lot tonight. I think he provides a lot of positive leverage, especially if you're playing him in captain.
Are you going to build any lineups? And I think Manek certainly would factor into this concept of saying Baycott, maybe he is limited. Maybe they're, underselling how hurt he could be. I'm going to build, 5 to 10% of my lineups, factoring that in. And in that case, it would be a huge bump to a guy like Brady Manek. Do you think that's viable if you're, MMEing this?
Yeah, I am. And I did leave some Baycott out in certain lineups. I have Manek in all of those lineups. I would not be playing a lineup that doesn't have Manek if you're leaving out Baycott is how I would frame it.
At least one, basically, in any lineup, you're saying?
Yep. I can check, but I am almost certain that I do not have a lineup that is without one of the two.
It's hard to imagine that. I mean, I'm completely in line with you. We've talked about how thin this team is. There's a couple other guys we'll get to as we work down, but the rest are guards of the main contributors. And the next man up, just going by price, is RJ Davis. He sits at 7,200 in the utility, 10-8 at captain. He's had some big games, like all of these guys. They have stepped up at the right time, particularly against Baylor. He played every minute of that game, all 45, had 30 points, regressed from there, but he chipped in nicely against Duke, 18-7-4. What about him? I assume he's another guy that you can make a case for across the board.
Yeah, so you're going to hear me echo this. You can make a case for any of the big four in the captain spot for North Carolina. I think if you're playing cash, low risk contest, RJ Davis is the worst, and it's because of pricing. Over the course of the year, he was historically cheaper than Caleb Love, and there's a lot of reasons for that. His usage is about 3% below Caleb Love's, and that's something we've seen historically throughout the year, and we've actually seen it throughout the tournament as well. The sites have not been adjusting price since that Baylor game. We saw him erupt, and that was a game where Love actually fouled out. So I think part of the reason RJ Davis erupts for the big game is Love is on the bench for a substantial portion of the latter part of that game. Now, since then, we've seen Caleb Love just absolutely erupt, and this guy has had an unbelievable role down the stretch. If you just look at the shots he's taken, he's been above 20 shot attempts in 2 of the last 3 games. To be exact, he's taken 24, 17, and 20 shots in their last 3 games. This is just absolutely ridiculous. And a lot of times we see players that have high shot rates, they're a little volatile because they're scoring dependent. If they hit their shots, it's fantastic. If they don't, they can leave you with a really low floor. But then there comes a point where if they just take so many shots, it kind of bakes in a floor altogether. And Caleb Love, over the last 3 games, he has a 32% shot rate. Especially if Baycott is injured, he should be asked to be the engine of the offense from a scoring perspective. So love Caleb Love. He takes a ton of threes. He's shooting him at a 37% clip, takes advantage of the same ball screen action that Manek does. Overall, Love is a better price-adjusted play than RJ Davis. But again, if you're playing large field tournaments, Love is going to be substantially more owned. So there comes a point where you probably want to consider RJ Davis over Caleb Love just for the sheer leverage he provides.
Are you going to build lineups where you have both of them together? I assume that that's fine.
Yes, of course. I like in my cash lineup, I'm playing all the big four. I'm not going to tell you who the captain is. I think you guys can probably figure it out. But that is, even though North Carolina is an underdog here, their rotation's a little tighter than Kansas. So these big four players all project a little bit better. I think the more interesting discussion is what you do on FanDuel, because they're significantly more expensive than the Kansas players on FanDuel. So it's a much more difficult decision over there. And if we look at the pricing of the big four, I think you can pretty clearly say that Manek is the best play just as the cheapest option. But then it's really tough to decide because there's only a $1,000 difference between Baycott and a guy like Caleb Love. RJ Davis is actually a pretty solid value over there. But overall, it comes down to Caleb Love is probably the best price-adjusted play to the big four on DraftKings, and he might be the 3rd or 4th on FanDuel. Over there, Manek just a significantly better play.
Looking at, and I don't know if you have it in front of you, the 3-point props for some of these guys over on PrizePicks, and we're going to dive in depth in a second, but RJ Davis's is at 1.5 3-pointers made. He can get hot. Caleb Love's is over under 3, and he's probably going to take 10 plus. So I think you could look at either or both of them. Is that something that you're considering when you look at these guys from the outside?
Yeah, for sure. I looked at 3-pointers this morning and nothing drastically stood out to me. They all seemed pretty efficient. I'm going to double check and see if the lines move. I think Agbaji could be somebody you look at just because he should probably be asked to take a little bit more. And right now I just pulled up the back end. Agbaji among we have 4 players with actual 3-point props on PrizePicks. Agbaji gives you the most positive leverage, and that's towards the over. He projects right around 2.9.
Okay. Fair enough.
Made 2 3-pointers attempted for Agbaji. It's 4.3.
What's it for Caleb Love?
Caleb Love, 3-point attempts.
8.
Let's see. He's a little further down. It's absurd. I don't know. He projects for 20 points for me. I'm sure we'll talk about his points prop here in a little bit. And it's up a point since this morning. I did the little PrizePicks VOD. He was at 16.5. He's at 17.5, and he's still under projected. He's at 19.5 points for us on the back end. And part of that on the back of him just shooting absurdly. Not only has he been hot, but he's just taking so many shots.
So many. And I get it. Yeah, he's going full JT Note, but he's making them.
And he's got Baycott in the front court to eat up those offensive rebounds when he missed, and then he gets more attempts.
So we've talked about the big 4. You've mentioned them. There are a couple other guys, but the one other guy that's a key contributor on this team, it just doesn't really show up per se, and certainly on the score sheet, would be Leaky Black. So what do you do with a guy? He's out there. He played all 40 minutes against Duke, and he was absolutely key at times. He took 9 shots, which for him is really surprising. But is he playable? And then more importantly to me, is he too aggressive if you wanted to go with Leaky Black as a captain?
I think he's probably too aggressive as a captain, just looking down at the value plays. So if you go to the back end of our projections, you can find value. It's just a little column that basically adjusts their projection for price. Leaky Black has a solid value projection, but overall the points are just so low. And on DraftKings specifically, the slate is so loose that it's not really giving you a lot of Leaky Black if you run optimal lineups. I think he'll be extremely contrarian. So in the largest of fields, you could probably mix him in if you're running something like 150. But overall, if you're in small fields, cash styles, I'm probably not putting Leaky Black in the captain spot. And the reason is this guy's on the floor for his defense. He's significantly less involved than the other starting 5 here, even though he'll play 39 minutes, 40 minutes, if all goes according to plan and nobody gets in foul trouble. His usage rate is below 9%. And the only usage he really has comes from an assist rate. The guy has a 6% shot rate on the year. His assist rate is up at 18%, which is solid, but assists, they're not a high value statistic in basketball. So you really want players that score. If they're peripheral players, you'd want them to stuff the stat sheet with things like blocks, high upside stats. So have Leaky really being involved only in the assist category is kind of troublesome here. The question I think you're going to run into when you're playing some of these value players is, do you take the consistent minutes and low usage with a guy like Leaky Black, or do you take one of the value pieces on Kansas that have less consistent minutes but better usage? And maybe that's a debate we can have a little later in the show. I think if you're running multiple lineups, you just mix and match between those 2 different ideas.
So working down, and I will say Chad is split. I have seen, Tar Heels are going to destroy, and Jayhawks they're not going to lose to a team with 5 players. So a lot of strong takes on both sides of this game, which is very, very fascinating. Certainly UNC has a tighter rotation. We've mentioned Leaky Black. Now what? So Puff Johnson, he played 9 minutes against Duke. Styles, he had a huge role against Baylor, but it wasn't because of anything else besides ejections and Caleb Love fouled out. He played 3 minutes against Duke. Are we really drawing to 5 guys on UNC, or do you think there's something to talk about with the bench for the Tar Heels?
Puff Johnson and Dontre Styles are only names you're considering if you're playing the largest of fields tonight. They are dependent on foul trouble or injuries. So tonight, more than really any other night in this tournament, you could maybe look at a Puff Johnson or Dontrez Styles because of Baycott's health status. Again, it sounds like you and I both do not believe Baycott is in too much trouble here. But if for whatever reason you think it could be an angle that you approach here that gives you an edge, it's Puff Johnson first and Dontrez Styles second. I do think Puff Johnson's going to be more owned, and we've seen Dontrez play well. So I'm not 100% certain that it's Puff that would come in and play all the minutes. More than likely, in the event that Baycott would get like 20 minutes in the event of fouls or injuries, I think Puff and Dontrez would split time.
On FanDuel, where it seems to be a little tougher, are you still looking to these guys as potential punts? Not maybe in the MVP or star, but in the utility or whatnot?
Not on FanDuel. My approach on FanDuel has been to play more Kansas players. So
Okay.
you essentially flip the roles. On DraftKings, UNC is underpriced. On FanDuel, Kansas is underpriced. So most of my builds on FanDuel specifically are isolating 3 Kansas players and 2 UNC players. And with that said, it's not getting to the tier where you're considering Puff Johnson or Dontrez Styles.
Look at that. Friend of the show, Ghetto Farmer Boy. Took second last week for $7.5K. Big thanks to the two of you. Extra $4. So now we're getting serious here. Extra $4 for you. So you can get, what is this a Quickie Mart hot dog on me? What is that?
Yeah, Lofty and I did a show, some Showdown show, and he was trying to tell me about Wawa.
Yeah, Wawa's amazing.
I've never been there, but then he
Every
asked me
time I
what
go to Atlantic City, good
my
times.
favorite restaurant was, and I told him my favorite food to get was hot dogs from this local gas station in Wisconsin called Quick Trip.
It sounds.
And I get one every time I stop for gas there, even if it's like 8 a.m.
Okay, well, that's frowned upon, but I still respect it. The second part of the question, I guess, is okay. I prefer the hot dog discussion, but thoughts on where ownership is going to go for the captain? I assume that even with the injury that Baycott will be very popular. Caleb Love, potentially. Where do you think it falls? And then maybe who might not get that ownership?
I think Caleb Love is the most owned captain. I think Baycott is probably number 2, and I think there's some leverage if you want to fade Baycott there because of the risk around him. There's a couple captains that project just slightly below the Baycott and Love tier that I think are much better leverage spots. One of them is Jalen Wilson. We'll get to him on the Kansas side here, but I also think you could look to players like Manek and RJ Davis.
Love it. Appreciate that, by the way. Ghetto Farmer Boy, very, very generous. And I will say we do have packages. It says right on screen, starting as low as $2.95. So if you're looking for these tools, the ownership, the projections for all the sports, including USFL, which will be coming, this is what you want to do. But you also want to sign up for PrizePicks. They've sponsored each and every show all year for us in college basketball. If you haven't been over there, it's been on the screen. Daily prop-based contests. We have promos. Use the promo code Awesemo for $100 first match deposit bonus. You can get on in, and you're going to get a free month of Awesemo Plus when you sign up using that link in the description. And that's important because all the tools that Matt has created and the team has worked on, they cater to PrizePicks. You can get the edges right off those tools. And what you're doing, 5-player lineups, you're netting up to 10x, and you're just projecting over under. So we've talked about the 3-point props. We're going to talk about some of these point props right now and rebounds. So for example, well, they have a no-brainer with Brady Manek. That's a free one, over 0.5. So you can take that. But you've got guys like Caleb Love at 17.5, Baycott at 14.5, RJ Davis at 13.5, Leaky Black at 5.5. Are you drawn to any of these point props on UNC or even Kansas? I know we haven't talked about them just yet, but feel free to rope them in.
And my favorite point prop on UNC is definitely Caleb Love. I liked it a little more this morning at 16.5, but now 17.5. I still think that's completely fine if you want to go there. And there's enough edge for us to target here. I think he's my favorite one.
One other question, and I've asked you this basically every show, so I have to keep up with tradition, is Armando Baycott's rebounds. And we've been saying over, and then in the last game, I was definitely somewhat apprehensive because I thought Duke's front line could cause problems. 20-something rebounds later, no problem. 13.5, is that where you have him basically projected?
Have him a little over that, and I think it's over or bust. You're definitely not taking the under unless you think he's hurt. but I think there's enough avenues where he plays limited minutes that is probably a stay away. But if you're taking a ton of props tonight, it's over or nothing with Baycott on the rebounds.
And I'm going to give you one more, and then we'll go to the Kansas side. This is a prop that every single for the tournament, I imagine it's cashed every time. Jalen Wilson's rebounds. The guy is, talk about a walking double-double. He has been absolutely fantastic. 14, 11, 11, and 12 boards, 37 minutes against Villanova. He's a great rebounding player. What do you have him? It's getting up there. It's at 9. Is that too much, or can we still potentially look over?
Yeah, so with Jalen Wilson, I would probably stay away from this. It's kind of normalized. Have him at 8.9, and that's at 35 and a half minutes. So it's closer to the role we've seen him play lately. Early in the tournament, you could really capitalize on some of the projections for PrizePicks because they still had him adjusted to season longs. They've caught up a little bit.
Yeah, his prize pick was at 7.5 for some of those games, just to give you an indication. It has moved up. All right, we've talked about that. And this kind of transitions into Kansas. I think it is a good question. Do you think that Leaky is going to guard Agbaji, or do you think that it will be someone else?
Yeah, I think he is.
Okay, so let's talk about this. I've been complaining all month that my teams can't shoot threes because none of my teams during the tournament can shoot threes, but Kansas, they did not go on my list because they could not miss. Agbaji was 4 for 4 before I even turned on the TV. He was 6 for 7. When they shoot like that, if they shoot like that tonight, they're going to win easily. No one's going to beat them. That was kind of a ridiculous situation, but let's start with them. Agbaji stepped up. McCormack, fantastic inside. How do we break down this team? They're a lot deeper relative to North Carolina, but who do we start with in terms of focal points?
So the first thing with Kansas, I think, just from a macro perspective, is the minutes aren't as tight for the reasons you mentioned. They have a little more depth and they're more willing to use it. Whereas Hubert Davis in North Carolina, they're not going to sub unless forced to, like fouls, ejections. That's the only reason they will sub. Kansas will. So immediately players like Agbaji, they don't project for 38, 39 minutes like the UNC do. So their projection's a little lower. With that said, there's still quite a bit of ceiling there. I think we start with Agbaji. He's the Big 12 player of the year. Unlike some of the North Carolina players, he's a little more shot dependent. He has a great usage rate, but the 23% shot rate stands out. Outside of that, he's below 13% in the other major usage statistical categories, which is a little bit of a problem in a vacuum against the North Carolina guys. However, we've seen his ceiling, and it comes from those 3-point shots. And when he's driving and creating, he has a massive ceiling from his scoring. It's just the peripherals aren't quite there in comparison. So he's not going to project quite as well from a price adjusted standpoint, but the ceiling is certainly there. And I do think he's one of the players that gives you the most just raw leverage on this slate if you play him in the captain spot, because his price adjusted projection is below most of the North Carolina players.
The other thing that's kind of tough with Kansas is, and this is why they're a very good team, they have a lot of guys that can kind of flash and step up in different situations. And Christian Braun is kind of like that, very solid, minutes to secure in the mid-30s. Doesn't do anything to me, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but to me, he doesn't do anything outstanding, but he contributes everywhere, chips in on the rebounds, can shoot, just a quality player. He is pretty pricey, though. Is that someone that is site-specific? What are you doing with Braun?
Yeah, he has between a 17 and 8% statistical rate for shot rate, rebound rate, and assist rate. So that gives you a phenomenal floor. You know, he's not going to bust off a bunch of missed shots, but he also doesn't have that ceiling that some of the other players do, like an Agbaji. He's extremely expensive on DraftKings, where he is probably the worst price adjusted play among the starting 5, but it is the exact opposite on FanDuel, where he's only slightly ahead of players like Remy Martin and DeJuan Harris in terms of pricing. He's below 10K on FanDuel, which is kind of that pricing threshold where we see all the studs. He's below Big Dave McCormack, and he is a much more consistent role than Dave McCormack. I think ceiling, you could argue, but Braun over there is a fantastic play. And he's one of those guys, the glue guys, that allows you to get to 2 North Carolina studs. So I think he's a much better FanDuel play, but he provides a lot of leverage in terms of captain on DraftKings. With that said, I would rather get to some other players like Agbaji or RJ Davis in the captain, who also provide leverage, just because they have better ceilings than Christian Braun, in my opinion.
And it is fascinating, when you're comparing the pricing across different sites. And the next guy's another example. Jalen Wilson is the most expensive Jayhawk over on FanDuel, but he is, a lot more pedestrian, $1,200 cheaper than Abaji, $600 cheaper than Braun over on DraftKings. I mentioned his rebounding prop on PrizePicks. He's been rebounding at a fantastic rate. Again, site specific, captain relevant. What do we do with Wilson?
I think he's the best Kansas captain in a vacuum on DraftKings, price adjusted. He just makes too much sense, especially when you consider there's a chance that projections still haven't quite caught up to his newfound role. This is a guy that was playing mid-20s, upper 20s in terms of minutes throughout the year. Since the tournament began, his role has really condensed into the mid to upper 30s per game. And he's a player that really gives you the best double-double equity on Kansas. He plays the 4, so he's largely going to avoid Baycott on the interior. He has a shot rate north of 20% in their last 3 games, a rebound rate at 31%. So we talked about Baycott cresting that threshold. Wilson's above the 30% threshold here as well. And he's actually active in the periphery in terms of assists and blocks and steals. He has a 19% assist rate in the last 3 games. He's really been the engine of this offense, especially with Agbaji kind of taking a more reduced role. Again, you mentioned the difference in the sites. He's a much better play on DraftKings. And he's one of these guys I'm very interested in the captain spot, especially with Caleb Love projected to take so much ownership, and then Baycott just being the player he is likely taking a lot himself. Jalen Wilson, with that double-double equity, you get bonuses for that on DraftKings. He's a very interesting player in the captain spot. I like him a lot there.
Now, so one of the guys all tournament that has come up, polarizing name, is Remy Martin, the Arizona State guy. Are they going to unleash him? It doesn't seem so. He's still in the 20s, and now his minutes are coming down a little bit. Didn't really have it going at all against Villanova, but he's another one he can contribute. And I don't know what happened. His rebounding rate is like comically inflated as a guard. He's been grabbing all the boards. Can he be? Yeah, I mentioned Leaky Black a couple of minutes ago as a maybe too aggressive captain. What about Remy? Is that too aggressive, or is that against the grain?
I think it'll be against the grain on DraftKings specifically, just because you don't need to get there. You can build really solid lineups with the more expensive captains like your Jalen Wilsons, your big 4 in North Carolina. I don't think you necessarily need Remy outside of just large field tournaments, playing him for extreme leverage. He's a player that's still coming off the bench. I thought there was a chance that maybe he'd get unleashed in the tournament. And now that we have a much larger sample, I don't think that's the case. He can be exploited in certain matchups because of his size on defense. And I think North Carolina is a team that could take advantage of that. So DeJuan Harris, who's been a much better defender, has been playing significantly more minutes, especially in their last 2 games. So that's a worry for me. But with that said, Remy does have ceiling performances. He's a guy that has the 2nd highest usage rate on the team. So when he's given minutes, he definitely has ceiling potential. He has actually a 16% shot rate, rebound rate, and assist rate across the last 3 games, even while playing limited minutes. So the ceiling's there. I'm going to be playing Remy in some of the larger field tournaments, but on DraftKings in a vacuum, he is a little bit expensive for my liking. There's a couple players I think I would rather play from a cost-adjusted perspective. On FanDuel, however, this is similar to the Christian Braun scenario. He's still really cheap over there. None of the big 4 are below 10K, but you have a couple players on Kansas that are Christian Braun, Remy Martin, DeJuan Harris, all below 10K, and they're the players that allow you to get up to the studs. So I'm much more interested in him over there.
Sorry, I got distracted by the porn bots coming in, making the chat very lively. But
I didn't see it.
You missed out. It was a scene, man. Next up, your boy, Big Dave McCormack. It might have been the best game he's ever had. Honestly,
I think it was
outstanding. Just dominant. 29 minutes, 10 of 12, 25 and 9. They had absolutely no answers. Now, Villanova uniquely not suited to deal with him. Certainly Baycott is, but they're going to have to go against each other and whatnot. So what do we do with him? He's not always on the floor, but he looked great. I assume he's a pretty high upside type player with a low floor.
That's exactly it. That's the best way to describe him. I'll tell you his rates in the last 3 games, and that includes the monster game he just had. He has a 14% shot rate, 13.5% rebound rate, and 2% assist rate in the last 3 games. So there's a chance that recency bias really captures like the public perception here with Big Dave McCormack, and he comes in far more over-owned, I guess I'll say, than he should be. even in those last 3 games, the minutes have been all over the place. It's a guy that played 29 minutes in the Final Four, but before that, he played 18 and 23. Now, he's a guy that does have some limitations. The first thing I want to talk about is he will be the player tasked with guarding Bacot. Bacot draws a ton of fouls. Big Dave McCormack is a player who does have a history of this. Bacot drew 4 fouls against Theo John in 6 minutes. He put Mark Williams into foul trouble immediately in that game, and it gave North Carolina a big edge. Now, he doesn't commit a lot of fouls himself on offense, Bacot that is. So this is kind of a one-way street where David McCormack is going to have to play very sound basketball, which is something he doesn't always do. Second, there's a chance that North Carolina tries to put him into this ball screen action they like to use and draw him away from the hoop. That's one of the reasons he's played limited minutes in some of the previous games. These teams know his defensive weaknesses and they'll try to draw him away from the basket, which is something I think North Carolina would be wise to try to do if he's on the floor. So those are all concerns with him. With that said, he has one of the highest offensive rebounding rates in the country that could be mitigated a little bit by Bacot's presence. But Big Dave has an immense ceiling when he's on the floor. It's just a matter of whether he gets the minutes, and more times than not, he's not getting them. So if he comes in highly owned, which I expect him to because of price, he's somebody I want to fade in tournaments. As far as cash games, he's not really a player you can avoid just because of price. I think you have to play him in cash, not only because the price adjusted projections there, but other people are going to have him. So if he drops that ceiling game, you're going to want him. And if he busts, he's so highly owned in cash that I don't think it really matters. So I'm going to eat him there and avoid him in tournaments.
It is true because, again, just taking you back real quick, when they played Miami, I thought Miami would be uniquely suited to cause major problems and pull him out to the perimeter. They were able to do that in the first half, and then he came out and shows violence and just went absolutely insane and crushed them, and they never looked back. But one of the storylines, and I kind of want to dovetail it with, is Lightfoot, who is back. He's playing, minutes in the teens. He would be the guy, I assume, that would correlate most negatively with McCormack. So if you think he's in foul trouble or you think they do pull him off the floor, does that make you more interested in Lightfoot as a possible punt?
Yeah, Lightfoot, I think, is one of the best punts on the slate. Minutes are way more consistent than the North Carolina players. He has an avenue to getting minutes, and there's a couple of them, actually. One is Big Dave fouling. He also probably would be the guy that plays more if Jalen Wilson fouls. Jalen Wilson typically doesn't do that, and he's not going to be on Bacot. So I don't see that being a major risk for Wilson, but in the off chance it happens, Lightfoot's probably the guy that still comes in. And then if Bill Self just decides he doesn't like Big Dave out there, it's Lightfoot that comes in. And we've seen that numerous times this year, double-digit occurrences. So Lightfoot, I think, is the prime beneficiary. Early in the tournament, he played limited minutes because of injury, and he's been in the teens in the last 2-3 rounds. So I'm not as worried about that now. I think he's a good GPP play in tournaments based on price.
Last guy who's strongly in the rotation is actually seen a uptick. I'm going to throw out the Texas Southern game. 18 minutes to 20 minutes to 26 minutes to 30 minutes for Harris, who looked really good against Villanova. It came kind of at the expense of Remy Martin in some ways. Is that something you expect tonight? If he pushes for 30 minutes again, is this a guy that we really have to consider?
Yeah, I think we do. He plays a similar role to like a Leaky Black, only he's a little more involved than Leaky on offense. He's still primarily a guy that gets it done with his assist rate. DeJuan Harris is usually on the floor over Remy Martin because of his defense. He's a better defender. He's just like a little more secure with the ball, whereas Remy Martin's like this little spark plug, but he takes a lot of like really risky plays. You see him take some bad shots early in the shot clock. It's not something you'll see with Harris. So he definitely has the trust of the coaching staff and his teammates. I think at his price, he's somebody you could use as a pivot away from Leaky Black. I think you could use him as a pivot away from Remy. I don't expect the minutes to be drastically different compared to the last 2 rounds.
Anybody else even remotely relevant? Coleman Lands. I don't know who Zach Clements is, but I did see his name. Is this as deep as we should be going?
That's as deep as you should go, contrary to what the broadcast says. I remember, what round was it? Sweet 16, maybe. It was, I think Charles Barkley saying that they should put KJ Adams in the game a little more because of his size, and Big Dave was getting exploited. So you might hear stuff like that. Probably not in the national championship, but if you heard that in the Sweet 16, don't pay it any attention.
Why not? Put in old Charlie McCarthy. Anyway, all right. talked about the teams, but again, I think, most people, you're using the tools, you can quickly identify who's projected the best. But let's talk a little about lineup construction. We got about 10 minutes. We've got some questions, throw them in there. I'll try to get to as many as we can, but how much money, let's start with this. You're going to leave some money on the table. Are you potentially leaving like thousands in some lineups? Is it just a little to differentiate? How much is too much? I mean, there's not that many cheapies. You're not playing guys that are just like the flat min, right?
No, I'm not playing anyone that's the flat min. I think the only guy you would consider at the flat min is Dontrez Styles. But to answer your question about salary on the table, that depends on the field size. So if you're playing things like cash, I don't think you need to worry about it at all. If you're playing some of the larger GPPs, like the $15, I can't remember what it's called, but it's the biggest GPP on DraftKings tonight, or you're playing the $1 mini max. Those are situations where you want to consider leaving salaries on the table. In rule of thumb, the larger the field, the more comfortable I am leaving salary and the more I'm willing to do so. I think on this particular slate, because of the condensed rotations, you're probably looking at like 2,500 max, 3K max in some of those large fields.
On FanDuel, we've got the MVP, we've got the star, we've got the pro. It's different in the sense that you don't pay extra. So when you're looking at that MVP, like how low potentially would you go? Are you sticking to the premier UNC guys or like Abaji and Jalen Wilson, or are you willing to go to a guy that on DraftKings you'd be saving salary, but on FanDuel all you're doing is being different?
No, I think it's similar to DraftKings, but really you're still trying to play highly projected players. Maybe they're just like a little bit of a cut below the elite guys. So over there, some players that make sense that might be a little expensive are the North Carolina guys. So like Baycott or somebody, because he doesn't really fit in a lot of lineups. He probably gives you a unique construction. And overall, I think you still want the highest projected players with those multipliers. So you still want Baycott, you still want Caleb Love, you still want Jalen Wilson. I think it's about getting contrarian around there. And if you are making some contrarian lineups in the captain spot and you're playing, or the what's called like the 1.5 MVP is what it's called, right?
MVP is 2x, star
2x.
is 1.5, and then pro is 1.2.
Okay, say you're playing like RJ Davis in the 2x spot. I don't think you need to get as crazy with the rest of your lineup. You could probably play a little more chalky. Whereas if you're playing, I don't know, who's with the best value for that. If you're playing Manek in the 2x or something to jam the rest of the players, I think then maybe you want to be a little more contrarian.
I got a 2v2 for you. We got Abaji and Harris, or RJ Davis and McCormack. This is for DK.
Tournament, GPP, field size, do we know any of that? Or just
DK single entry. That's all I know.
The Davis side had, who was the second player? That was where I leaned on first.
Davis and Big Dave.
Yeah, that's where I'd go.
Okay, very nice. What do we got here? Oh, this is a good question. Are you looking to do any 5-1s? We talk about the onslaught a lot in NFL Showdown. Are you looking to just take, say you think Kansas just absolutely rolls them, you go 5 and then you go back with Love or Baycott or Manek, something like that?
I do have some of that tonight because I think it's going to be contrarian. I have it more so on the North Carolina side because their minutes are also tighter, but I can see it with the Kansas side. The spread is 4.5 in some spots. So if you think Kansas plays above that spread, which happens like roughly 50% of the time, then you could see some other players get more involved. It's just harder with Kansas because they play a deeper bench.
Did you bet the game?
I did not. I've been waiting for a 4.5 on North Carolina since you and I last spoke, and I haven't seen it. So I don't know. Talk me into the 4.
I can't. Listen, the truth of the matter, I think it's a very efficient spread. It feels about right. In our premium betting Discord, which if you are interested, again, you can sign up right in the links there. Even if you come in for the week, Alex Baker, Steve Buzzard, myself, great group in there, dropping premium betting picks for all the sports, not just college basketball. I used Kansas money line in a parlay tonight on the ice. I do think that they're going to win the game, but the 4 I think could come into play. This is a close competitive game. Obviously, Baycott's ankle, we have to see. If he's hobbled, I will live bet Kansas pretty quickly. I don't think that's going to be the case. Get in live. Get one of your, what's it called? Kawhi hot dogs, quickie hot dogs.
Quick trip.
Get one.
Quick
Yeah,
trip.
Kawhi Leonard's, his future when he owns a chain in Wisconsin. Get one of those. Get a 4 Loco. and watch the game, maybe hit it live? You looking to take a position on the total live, maybe a little under?
The total I lean towards over. I'm seeing 152 right now. I think there's a lot of avenues to that playing over. Both these teams play with pace. In North Carolina in particular, they are willing to run and gun despite playing five guys. These guys are just the iron five out there. They do not care at all. They're sprinting up and down the floor. Luckily, Kansas will do that too. So I think there's a lot of potential for buckets in transition.
PrizePicks question. Both Jalen Wilson and Braun have 11.5 points. That's their over under. Is there one that you would lean over on, lean under on? Like, where do you see maybe the biggest discrepancy considering they both have the same prop line?
I think they're both solid plays towards the over. I think Wilson's the better play overall. But I mean, this game has a huge total. Kansas is implied for 78 points.
Yeah. And if they win and cover, you'd think they could easily push over 80 in a lot of those scenarios. So
like Jalen Wilson and Christian Braun being implied for 23 of those points come together, that's 60 points that are unaccounted for. Like, who is scoring 60 points on Kansas if Braun and Wilson are not involved? Like, if this plays to the total, I don't see how these are correct.
So we talked about the 5-1. This is an interesting take on it. Thoughts on using the 1 as the captain? So like Bacon at captain and then a Kansas stack.
If you're using the 1 at captain, it's probably just like a pure shooter or somebody that's like accounting for a lot of the points overall. Like Baycott could get there on rebounds, and somebody else could have like a huge rebounding performance. I think the one player who could like peripherally soak up enough and then have a massive shooting performance is Agbaji or Caleb Love. If you're playing Baycott in the captain, he probably needs blocks. He probably needs rebounds because he's more expensive. So for that scenario, it's Love, Agbaji. Agbaji makes a lot more sense on DraftKings because of pricing in this scenario that was just laid out.
The spread is moving to 4.5 at some places. So keep an eye out over there in Wisco.
Yeah, I'm in the backwoods up here. I don't have the options. I don't have the options you guys have.
Pressing refresh. It may come. We got a couple of minutes left, not even. Chat, you know what I want you to do? Let's do it. Put in your winner. Who is taking down the national championship? Let us know. Is it Kansas? Is it UNC? I think it is going to be Kansas. Kind of rooting for North Carolina, but I think the Jayhawks take it. Who are you rooting for, and who do you think wins?
I'm cheering for North Carolina, not because of any reason in particular.
Because they
in like
beat
my
Marquette.
personal life. No, I don't care about that. I bet North Carolina in that game, so I was happy.
So did I.
I guess I'm cheering for North Carolina because I'm trying to bet them at 4.5.
So you want the quicks? I'm telling you, Kansas quick start. You can get North Carolina like plus 6.5. You call it a day.
That would be lovely.
It's been a lovely college basketball season. I do want to say my final thoughts, and I'll pass it to you. Said it for college football, and I'll say it for college basketball. March Madness is one of my favorite times of the year. Hopping on these shows with you and seeing everyone show up, it's just been an absolute blast. We wouldn't be doing these shows if you guys didn't come and chat and support us and press the like button, do all that stuff. So I just wanted to say thank you. It's been an awesome tournament. We've had an absolute blast. I know with baseball and USFL and all the new sports coming in, we're going to see plenty of you guys for the college basketball streets. It's been a great time. Matt, any final thoughts as we put a bow on a fun college basketball season?
Yeah, appreciate everyone, all the people that have been here since the tournament started, all the people since the beginning of the season. Thank you guys for allowing Ben and I to do this, doing what we love. If you're looking for content in the future, I'm writing the biggest USFL breakdown. I can't believe how big it's actually become. But if you're interested in that, it's coming out tomorrow, I think. I don't know. We'll see. But it is every single skill position player you could possibly think of in that league written up. Otherwise, Ben, college football is going to be here soon enough. I'm excited for it, man.
And we are going to have plenty of college football in the off season. We've got a ton of the NFL draft will be coming up. So don't think you won't be seeing us. But for me, for Matt, for Mike behind the glass, who did a great job as always, good luck tonight. Enjoy the national championship. And of course, stay tuned for all things Awesemo, where we've got you covered for each and every sport, each and every day. Good luck, and we'll talk to you guys soon.